Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Good evening, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up Skan AI. And thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Beyond Task Bots, How Process Agents Drive Enterprise ROI with Agentic. Unless you've been living under a rock lately, I don't need to tell you that Agentic AI is hot. It's the buzzword. It's probably the most talked about thing other than just Gen AI in general from a couple of years ago. And my calendar is filled with customers and other members coming to us, trying to figure out how they apply this to their business. There is a lot of marketing hype out there. But what we want to do today is kind of drill down on an actual use case around Agentic AI, talking about process agents. And we've got a couple experts here to help walk you through that today. Before I introduce them, real quick background on us. If it's your first webinar with us, we are a professional association and media organization focused on the automation and AI space. We've got over 130,000 members worldwide, all coming to us for education, networking, and advice. So if there's something that you're looking for help with, check out unpack.com or reach out to me or my team. We're happy to be of service or at least point you in the right direction. So let me introduce today's speakers. We have with us Vinay Mummigatti. He's EVP Strategy Customer Transformation at Skan AI, and Cissy Williams, advisor and former COO at Protective Life. But I want them to introduce themselves in a little bit more detail to you, and then we'll jump in. Cissy, can we go with you first?
Hey, yeah, thanks, Dan. So Cissy Williams, as Dan said, I've got about 30 years of experience on the business technology side, primarily in the insurance industry. My focus has been on operating strategies, operating models to support those strategies, M&A, customer experience, and then leading operational and technology teams and capabilities. So I'm excited to be here today and talk a little bit about Agentic AI.
Great, Cissy. Thanks for joining us. And Vinay?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, good evening, everyone. Vinay Mummigatti, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. In my role at Skan AI, I am responsible for multiple functions. One of the major focus is on strategy for the company, which includes product, go-to-market, and various other functions, but also multiple functions roll up to me. One is customer success at a global level, strategic alliances and ecosystems, and marketing. So before joining Skan, I spent most of my career working for large enterprises. In my previous role, I was Chief Automation Officer at LexisNexis, where I was also a customer of Skan and drove large-scale AI and automation programs, digital transformation at a global level. I also served Bank of America for 8 years as a head of automation and process excellence, and prior to that, as a head of business process management, Center of Excellence at United Health Group. So nice to be a part of the session and looking forward to presenting.
Great, thank you so much. So real quickly, the format today is Vinay is going to talk with Cissy, share with you his perspective based on what he's seeing in the industry, and then we'll have a panel discussion and then open it up for audience Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions for the panelists, go ahead and send those in, and we'll get to those towards the end of the session. And with that, Vinay, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
We can see it.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So welcome to the presentation on the Agentic AI. So let me start off by providing a context to the main topic. We are at an inflection point where we are seeing a large-scale disruption across the industry in terms of how human productivity is being disrupted, how the operating models are being disrupted. And third is there are many new industries being born because of the evolution of AI in the last few years. But all this evolution and disruption is creating a sense of urgency across the layers of management, all the way from the board members to the C-suite to the operations leaders. Everyone is under a gun to change and demonstrate value using the power of AI. But then all this rush is also creating a friction in terms of the promises versus the reality. Now, that is at the heart of today's presentation and what Skan is trying to do. But fundamentally, if you look at the state of agentic AI today, we see that there is a mad rush to do proof of concepts. Everyone is in a learning mode. They're learning, they're experimenting, but we are not seeing enough traction in terms of the proof of concepts being delivered in production and really impacting the operational value streams. We also see a big challenge in terms of the data and metrics. One is in terms of the readiness of data on how you feed, how you train the agents, because most companies have very siloed structures and siloed database structures, whether it is transactions, customer master data records, product master data records, and various other enterprise systems and data sources. And this fragmented data sources are creating a bigger challenge on how to train the agents and how to make them productive and of value. But other important aspect is when companies are trying to invest in agentic AI, there are two kinds of metrics we can focus on. One is the model performance metrics, like the accuracy and the drift and so many other areas. On the other side, it is the operational outcomes. Is it really giving me a lift in terms of productivity or the speed to market or customer value generation? So most of the focus is on still on model metrics as against the operational outcomes. And the third area is the vendor lock-in and the playbook aspect. Today, a lot of companies who are investing in agentic AI, they are trying to see which vendor I should align with. There are two schools of thoughts here. One is, should I look at creating my own agentic architecture, agentic frameworks, agentic strategy, or should I just align with the Microsofts, the Googles, or other emerging players in the market like the Anthropics or the OpenAIs of the world? And it's a double-edged sword. You align to a vendor system, you get locked in into the vendors, but then you do your own things in terms of architecture, strategy, and all, and then you are going through a big learning curve. So that's one of the challenges. And secondly, it is also the end-to-end view of an agentic operating model. When you bring agents into the operations, it is not as easy as deploying another bot or an automation tool. You're really automating human agency. That calls for a well-defined thought process. What does your blueprint look like when you bring agents into your operating models? How do humans and agents work together? And there is a very little thought in the industry today on defining these agentic operating models, which we believe is at the heart of what can go right or wrong as we move forward. So Skan is at the heart of solving these problems in terms of, one is, how do we deliver enterprise level return on investment in terms of agentic investments? Secondly, how do we help companies and enterprises build agents that are meaningful, that are of value, and that they are sustainable in terms of delivering operational value? So with this background, I want to move forward. But before that, Cissy, who is a very accomplished industry leader, and Cissy has seen a large number of transformations across her career, I would like Cissy to weigh in here before I jump into the next slides.
Sure, Vinay. Thanks. And, you've covered a lot of the whys. I think I would just call the attention of the group to the statistics on the top of the slide. There's a very steep learning curve with AI and with agentic AI, and 40% of projects canceled, 76% struggling to scale AI beyond pilots. Organizations and leaders need to go into this with a mentality to truly sponsor this learning curve, to sponsor the learnings. It's not different than many other tech learning curves, but the upside is so high that it really puts a lot of pressure on the organization. And I think we'll come back later that while this slide focuses on some of the operational failure points, some of the root causes are likely to be classic change management issues, such as structures, alignment, and measurement. And we'll get to that later in the conversation.
Thank you, Cissy. So let's look at what is happening in the vendor landscape across the agentic world. So the whole agentic space is so vast that no single vendor or a group of vendors can really do justice to the enterprise needs. And why I say that is, like, if you see a permutation map of number of platforms, number of processes, the types of content, and the enterprise needs, if you put a permutation map, you will see that there is a need for thousands and thousands of these agentic vendors. But then broadly, if you see today, there are vendors, which can be classified into three broad patterns. At one extreme, we see vendors providing personal agents. And what I mean by personal agents is these are agents which are able to meet certain specific tasks that humans do. Like we do handle various types of file or content types, we do coding, we do conversations. So most of these personal agents are built to perform these repetitive human actions in the day of a life of a operator, like sending emails, summarizing documentation, searching files and searching web, so many of these things. Mostly the focus here is on personal productivity, not so much about enterprise level. Next is the platform agents, and these platform agents are coming from the likes of vendors who are providing enterprise scale transaction or case management platforms like Salesforce.com, ServiceNow, Nice, Pegasystems, and I can go on, even ERP platforms. They are launching various types of agents, but these agents are specifically trained on the proprietary data models and the processes that are offered by these platform companies. Then comes the whole new gamut of process agents. Now, these process agents are, I call the use case landscape is 80% in the overall agentic space. And what do these process agents do and how they differentiate is they are complex cross-platform process agents, which are basically catering to the enterprise needs of how enterprises run their core operations and processes. Now, these are cross-platform, so there is no single platform that can meet the requirements. And these are also complex decision involving processes where humans are at the heart of making decisions, understanding exceptions, and handling those exceptions. Now, as you move from left to right, today where we see maximum investment is in the personal agents and to some extent platform agents. But where is the largest value logged in? It is on the process agents. Secondly, as you move from left to right, it is mostly left side agents where the personal agents and platform agents are focused on efficiency play, whereas the effectiveness, which is the outcome oriented, is where on the process agent side. So I was talking to one of our customers, chief AI officers, and the gentleman said, well, I am seeing a lot of adoption of agents within my company and at the industry level, but there is no bottom line impact on the P&L level or operating budget level. Most of the benefits are still being derived at a personal level, where people are able to take a couple of hours extra in their day and spend time with their family or with their pets or personal hobbies, but it's still not translating into enterprise level return on investment. So that's the state of affairs at a vendor level. Cissy, any comments before we move forward?
No, I think it's just a really good framework to think about the opportunities.
Perfect. Thank you. So moving forward, why process agents offer the greatest business ROI? Now, if you see the enterprise operating budgets, the way they are distributed, more than 70% of the operating budgets are invested in labor compensation costs. And those are human salaries and costs associated with human operators. But more than that, let's look at why humans are needed. So today, humans play a significant role across all value chains, all the way from inquiry to onboarding from a customer journey standpoint, transaction to fulfillment in terms of the core transactions, whichever industry you take, and then request to resolution of a customer service value chains. Across the board, you see humans embedded at every step in the process. Now, what defines human work is these 5 pillars. The first pillar is the ability to understand the objective and the goals. So the goal-oriented behavior is at the heart of human agency. The second is the ability to handle multi-level processes, where a process is not one and done with a single task, which is what RPA traditionally does, but a process could be a multi-level decisioning that is also bringing in the third pillar of a context. So as you move from one step in the process, from an intake of a case to setup of a case to validation to customer requirements to history analysis, all these things require a process mindset and a contextual understanding of the case. And then the fourth pillar is the use of tools, the various types of tools and actions that humans get to use. And then last but not the least, it is a continuous focus on optimization of the outputs and the learning. So between these 5 pillars, the process agents have a highest potential to either replace or augment human agency. Now, this requires a paradigm shift in terms of our focus from task automation to outcome automation or a persona automation. And that is the biggest value we see in terms of how process agents will deliver enterprise scale transformation. Any thoughts, Cissy, from your side?
Just this slide and your commentary really stresses the horizontal nature. It's not discrete. It's not a task that is once and done, but it's very much dependent, which makes it more complex, but also gives you the opportunity to influence outcomes through the entire process or life cycle. And that's where the promise is.
Yep. Thank you. Good point. So what makes process agents different? I'll take a little bit of a clue from my hobby here. I love cooking. So I thought, why not we talk a little bit about food? So when you look at personal and platform agents, these agents are pretty much trained on non-enterprise specific data sets. Say, if you look at OpenAI ChatGPT, or the agents that are coming from ServiceNow, or agents coming from Salesforce, or any other vendors, pretty much they are trained on generic data sets that are not very specific to your enterprise, your data models, your core processes. And they are mostly like a fast food chain, where you go to any fast food chain all the way from one coast to another coast, be it a burger shop or a pizza shop or a Subway or anything. They're not catering to individual customer needs. They have basically a preset menu, and you pick and choose what you want from that menu. This is exactly what happens when you do personal or platform agents coming from vendors, because there's not a much choice or differentiation at an enterprise level. Now, in contrast to that, let us imagine we have a personal chef in our kitchen who is cooking the food based on our nutritional needs, our kitchen utensils and standards, our personal menu preferences. Now, this is what we look at from a process agent standpoint, because when we talk process agents, we are talking deeply specific process models and process agents which are catering to enterprise needs, that are covering organizational models, our core decisioning logic, our core data sources, whether it is master data sources or transaction data sources. But just imagine if I have to have an agent that can automate my entire process within my enterprise context. That is exactly what we are looking at here in terms of the specificity. And this is what finally delivers or retains our competitive advantages. Now, as you move from the left side to the right side here, we are looking at a different kind of models, where we call them as large action models, which are built on the foundation of large language models, but essentially they are embeddings of human actions, which are trained on specific processes, data, and organizational decisioning logic. Cissy, want to add anything here?
Well, I'm with you. I love food, so I love the analogy. But when I look at the picture on the right, it just screams variability, right? What if an ingredient isn't there? What if it's not fresh? It's the judgment of the human in the picture. So they have to make judgment calls about whether they change something or change a recipe or change an ingredient or season more or season less. So variability, judgment, and then adaptation. So it is very much a dynamic process with your personal chef, that they are optimizing the outcome for you. And it's dependent a lot on what they bring to the table in terms of their experience, their judgment, and their ability to adapt.
Yeah, you bring a great angle of thinking here, Cissy, because that variability, exception handling, and real-time optimization is something that is very unique to the process agents. Thanks for sharing it. Yeah. So let's look at continuing this thread forward. Why are process agents so difficult to build? At the heart of process agents is the human agency and emulation of human behaviors, right? We're not just automating a task or bringing in some third-party platform. We are entirely trying to understand what humans do in the enterprise landscape. And at a high level, there are 4 terms which come to my mind. The humans are very much involved in, firstly, sensing the inputs that are given to them, and then applying thinking or reasoning behavior. And then we have ability to take actions. And lastly, it is about continuous learning. So between these four pillars, sense, think, act, and learn, the humans are constantly evolving. And that is why it has been so difficult for us to emulate these behaviors in technologies. But now with generative AI, things are fast changing. And to model that human behavior, you need certain types of training data that embodies the flow of process, actions performed by humans, various types of communications, systems interfaced, the timestamps, errors, exceptions handling, which we talked about in the previous slide, systems and environment variables, documents accessed. When you put all these models or all these elements of a human model, it becomes very difficult to train a process agent, because a process agent has to emulate humans and their behaviors, which is embodied in terms of these taxonomy. So this is where we see the missing link. How do you embody human behavior and human agency behaviors in terms of a data model? That training data is a missing element in most of the agent vendors and platforms today. Sissy, you want to add any thoughts here from your side?
Just the input on the right that I might bring is that people do things differently, right? Even if you have a process defined, humans adapt to what their preferences are. So I think there's also a preference component that you need to capture and engineer for.
Yeah, very true. Exactly. That's what actually encapsulates the human behavior aspect. So modeling human behavior is the foundation of what we are going to do or look at next. So what does it mean to emulate a human behavior? Now, if you look at human agency, which is the foundation of the word agentic, because the word agentic has evolved from agency, which is the human aspect of it. So with the evolution of generative AI, our appreciation for human agency has grown manyfold, because now we are able to understand how we think, how we behave, how we act. And there are three characteristics that define a human agency. The first human agency characteristic is the power to abstract. Now, see, humans have the ability to, draw patterns and take actions or decisions based on very limited information. Like, I don't need to be trained on all possible scenarios of a particular process or a task. You give me three types of tasks, I get trained on three types of tasks, and then you throw me another 20 types of tasks. I can easily handle them because now I have the power to abstract and use my logic to create those patterns. Second is the tacit knowledge. Like, we have many years of or decades of our knowledge, which has been built through the childhood, through education, through social behaviors, and through many other types of knowledge adoption mechanism. And that tacit knowledge is always working in our brains, which we normally don't explain. And that tacit knowledge is at the heart of human agency. So the word tacit dimension or tacit knowledge comes from Michael Polanyi's book, The Tacit Dimension, where he explains why humans can't always explain why they do certain things. And that is exactly at the heart of human agency. The third is the power to reason. Like, we have, as Sissy was explaining earlier, we know how to handle exceptions. We know how to take independent reasoning and behaviors. And we know how to do trade-offs between cost, speed, customer experience, empathy. So many of these behaviors come into play, and we know how to trade off given certain objectives and parameters. Now, to impact productivity at scale, we need to be able to model and emulate this human agency. So let's look at how we can achieve this objective. So let me give you an analogy of the Tesla car. So, when Tesla was building their self-driving cars, they didn't do it programmatically. They didn't go and explicitly program, given a particular scenario or the traffic conditions or the traffic light scenario, what should the self-driving cars do. They basically put the best drivers in the car and let the cars and the drivers run the cars, while there were hundreds of sensors, multiple cameras observing everything that the car was going through. And eventually they downloaded the sensor and camera information to build the models that finally fed the self-driving cars. Now, if we want our agents to behave like humans, shouldn't we train them on human emulation behaviors? Let's see how we can do that. Okay, so this is at the heart of what Skan is trying to achieve through our agentic approach. So over the last 1.5 years, we have been evolving our core foundational platform, which is AI powered process intelligence, into more of agentic platform. So Skan has always been a process intelligence platform since the time Skan was founded in 2018. And today we work with more than 50 Fortune 500 companies setting up Skan process intelligence for large scale enterprise transformation. But what we observed is that the data that gets generated using Skan's process intelligence is a perfect raw material or the training data to train the process agents. Now, this is at the heart of what Skan does. So, we are able to observe how humans work. We are able to abstract every single action that humans take. And using the power of abstraction, we are now able to generate large action models which are feeding the agents that exactly emulate the human behaviors. So let's see how Scan achieves this through two quick demos. The first demo is to show you how Scan behaves or how Scan works as an observation platform. So you see here, Scan is observing what a particular human operator is doing or multiple human operators are doing, whether it's mainframes, multiple systems, emails, documents, everything. And that observation is being converted into a steady stream of structured data, which you see on the right side, a flowing data that's getting generated. Now, using the power of AI, we generate AI models or process models, which are digital twin representation of work. Now, I bring the concept of digital twin because when Scan is observing hundreds and thousands of operators, we not only observe, we generate the data, we abstract it, but we represent it as a digital twin. And the digital twin is represented in terms of data, models, analytics. That is what feeds the agentic training set or training data set. So now, having generated the training data set, I want to take you into the agentic platform that Scan has built. And basically, how we work is this is the root of what Scan offers as a process intelligence platform. Using that particular output, we have created a large action model data set, which is trained on every enterprise specific data. Now, this is where we bring the enterprise specificity because we train our models on your specific data, your specific processes, your organizational decision logic, and retaining the competitive advantage, which is very unique to your differentiation in the marketplace. So this is at the heart of how we build our agentic platform powered by AI process engine that is at the heart of how we observe, how we abstract, how we generate data. Okay. Now I'm taking you into the demo of our agent platform. I'll start with the designer environment. How Scan captures the process models from its process intelligence and then generates the agentic code. So let me start off by showing you the data that is coming out of the process intelligence layer. Now, Scan has been deployed on a few agents. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me take a pause here. So Scan has been deployed on a set of agents, and we have captured multiple process instances here. And Scan has identified 6 different variations of the process here. This is a process that is for payment coordination in an insurance scenario. Now, having captured these processes here, what we will do now is we are going to feed this into build agent button on the right side. And when you see the build agent,
Vinay,
yeah,
I'm not seeing your demo.
oh, okay. I think the sharing stopped for some reason. Okay. Do you see my screen now?
I do.
Thanks for letting me know. Okay. So is it still visible?
It is.
Okay. So let me quickly retrace my steps here. So we are going to show the agentic platform in action, starting with the capture of the processes from process intelligence layer, and we are now building the agent. I won't pause here because I think it's doing something with the screen share. So now we have generated an abstraction of the process model, which shows a complete end-to-end flow of the process. From here, we are now going to build the playbook, which is an actionable representation of how agent should work. So now we have taken all the actions being performed. This is a auto-generated summary of the process flow with each of the steps, the decision points, and this is the way we provide traceability and auditability for subject matter experts to know if the agents will be behaving exactly what they are expected to do. Now we are creating the agent playbook. So here we use a self-critique model when we create a playbook. The playbook is basically a representation of what the agent's actions are going to look like step by step. And once we have seen this, the agent also has identified what are the gaps in reasoning. And here it says, oh, I have found that the threshold amount is missing, and I want an escalation email when there are certain exceptions. So we manually feed those inputs. Then it asks for the tools that we need to be using as a part of this agentic function. It has identified 4 different tools that we came across in the process intelligence layer. It's giving us an opportunity to choose, should we use all 4 or maybe eliminate 1 or 2, but we choose all 4 here. And last but not the least, we create a business context tab, which the agent is asking a subject matter expert in terms of the next step. Are there any reference documents, templates, manuals, exception procedures that we need to be uploading as a RAG-based reference engine, that is retrieval augmented generation? And that's what we just uploaded here to documents. And then finally, we name the agent. So when we create agent here, it creates a Docker file, which is a code that you can run on any of the agentic frameworks. But we also have our own agentic execution platform where you will see that the agent is now running in action. And as the agent is running in action, it is performing claim intake, email listening, payments adjudication, and then finally processing, with all the audit trail being maintained on the left side here. So a little bit of a rushed demo here, but in the interest of time, we wanted to show you how we cover the entire agentic operating model, all the way from observation to abstraction, to using the abstraction and generating the designer for agentic, and then converting the agent designer into executable code. So the approach we are taking is, when we deliver this agentic code, firstly, we are trying to make it platform agnostic. So whether you use Google agent development framework or Microsoft or any other frameworks, you should be able to run our agents, or you can use the framework that Skan offers you as a part of our agentic operating model. So with this, I will quickly switch to the next slide.
And Vinay, I would just say on the demo, as a former customer, I really do feel like the Skan suite of capabilities gives you the tools that you need to understand your process and how it's executed in reality, to engineer for that transformed experience that you're looking for, the transformed process, and then really to sustain it, both with support tools for your human agents as well as the audit trail that Vinay mentioned. So really, really powerful suite of capabilities that I've had an opportunity to observe. So moving on to kind of wrapping up our comments, creating a future-ready organization. As you can see on the left, there are really varying degrees of opportunity, right? How do you get to agentic automation? There's steps, it's a learning curve, it's a spectrum, but you aspire for the higher level. And that requires really all of the enablers on the right. We haven't talked a lot about strategic business alignment, but agentic AI is not about onesie, twosie FTEs of productivity or FTEs that you can divert to higher value work. It's really not about a functional operating budget. You really must define and organize around strategic drivers, right? Not about how you improve. It's about how you win. What must be true to win, to transform your business? Is it a customer acquisition advantage? Can you get to customers that maybe your competitors can't? Is it a superior experience for any one of your stakeholders And that gives you competitive advantage. Is it a sustainable cost advantage? So not only do you transform it, but you're able to maintain that. All of those are examples of strategic drivers that you really, really need to organize around. Second is probably the most critical to me, end to end. It is horizontal. Every organization still operates with silos. And as much as we try to engineer, they're always going to be there. So it's not a focus for teams or functions on their own. Those will allow you to improve results, but the results won't be considered really winning or sustainable. So something like sub-function optimization is really an oxymoron. You have to factor the horizontal whole, the life cycle of whatever you're trying to transform. Really critical to take that horizontal end-to-end. Change management, it's about human agency, right? Human dynamics. And like most leading edge technology efforts, as we spoke about earlier, failure typically comes from the human dynamics, not the technology. So you need to focus on the why, back to strategic alignment and winning, how it works, what success looks like at all levels. So it's really very thoughtful, strategic, proactive change management that needs to wrap around your program. Ethical and responsible, acknowledging the issues, asking the hard questions, seeking guidance, being transparent in all things AI. We're all learning. It's very much a dynamic topic, and you need to stay on top of it. And then last but not least, governance is critical. And I know governance kind of gets a bad rap in a lot of organizations, but your governance has to be top down, right? Effective governance of a strategic and transformational effort is hard. It requires active engagement at all levels of the organization, but critically requires top management engagement. It's not enough to be able to talk AI in a boardroom or with your peers at a conference. The level of engagement that's required for success is much higher. You have to have the right leaders around the table in order to define those strategic objectives, in order to break down the barriers that occur naturally in that end-to-end process, and then to be the champions, the champions of the successes, as well as the champions of the learning curve, and understanding that failure must move us forward. So really, that whole governance framework is difficult to engineer, but critical to ensure that your strategic business alignment all the way through the other enablers position you for success.
Yeah. Thanks, Cissy. Excellent summary. And again, you brought in a lot of depth here in terms of how you should view agentic not as another toolkit, but basically as a fundamental change management initiative. And going back to the first slide, when we started off with the state of the industry here, I just want to summarize by saying that the approach we are taking addresses the three core areas. The first is moving away from the POC purgatory to solving real problems that are at the heart of your operations is the most important thing. Second is the ability to have data to train your agents in terms of the first party, high fidelity, direct modeling of human action data that can feed into your agents and train the agents based on real data that makes a meaningful process agents. Third is the agentic operating model, which Cissy very nicely summarized towards the end. You need to view this as a end-to-end value chain of agents, all the way from design, optimization, build and deploy, sustain as a complete agentic journey. So I think 90% of the companies still are focused on proving that agents work, but whereas we need to also think broadly in terms of how to make them operational and sustainable with a value-focused mindset. So with that, I would like to open up for any questions. And the webinar will also be recorded, and you will have an access to the recorded version. But open for any questions here.
Yeah, thanks, Vinay. Thanks, Cissy. I wanted to I've got a bunch of questions. And for the audience, if you have any questions for the panelists, please go ahead and send them in now. And we'll get as many answered as we can in the 20 minutes or so we have left. before we went live, Cissy, we were talking about kind of, AI excitement versus reality. I'm curious, as somebody who's, been on the buy side, in these organizations, why do so many companies get stuck in this AI pilot phase and never kind of get into production?
Yeah, well, I think there are a lot of factors. I think one is being realistic about expectations and understanding how steep that curve is. Having that mindset to go in and sponsor a steep learning curve, right? Organizational mindset that you're going to stumble a few times. Willingness to look broadly at strategic opportunities, solutions, and capabilities that support that. Again, I think what Vinay's covered so well is that there's so much focus on task and not on process. That's going to be critical to overcoming that feeling that AI isn't delivering what you expected it to.
Vinay, I know you can answer this question from both perspectives. You've been on the buy side and the sell side. What are your recommendations when you speak to a new potential client who's maybe excited about this agentic AI term they've seen so much about? How do you kind of parse out the excitement versus whether it's actually a really good use case or not?
Yeah, and this is a discussion we have. Hardly a day passes when we're not having this discussion with one or multiple potential customers or existing customers. The first thing we always talk about is what is the exact business problem you're trying to solve, focus on it. And second is we look at, what is the pattern of agents are you looking at? Is it a discrete task or is it a process agent? And exactly what delivers the business value for you? And if it's a process agent, how do you go about making sure that the agents are trained on the right training data? And how do you get the training data and make it relevant for your operations and make it sustainable? Third is the whole sustainability aspect. Today, why POCs don't go to the production is because they are never viewed as a production ready deployment. They are always built in labs and they remain in labs. The moment you take it from a real production use case, real production blueprint of a target state human agent working or operating model, it's very easy to move into production. But most agentic solutions today don't have the mindset because the folks who are leading agentic solutions are either some remote R&D team sitting in an AI team or somebody sitting in an innovation lab. The real operators, the real business me's are not even involved in those discussions. I think the day agentic solutions become the mainstream discussion for a subject matter expert, operations leaders, and the business leaders, that is when we will start to see real value come through. And right now they are on the fringe, not in the mainstream.
Vinay, any particular industries you're seeing across your conversations that are further ahead than others, or industries that are more laggards than others?
I see across the board there is a fascination for co-pilots. Microsoft has virtually democratized co-pilots, and every industry today is lapping up Microsoft co-pilots or co-pilots coming from XYZ tools, and that's where we see a large adoption. But that's also an area where there is a lot of disappointment and disillusionment, because we're talking to one of the Fortune 10 companies who literally had a massive rollout of co-pilots across 20,000 operators, only to realize after 6 months that the productivity is hardly recognizable. And those kind of frustrations are seen across the board. But there are companies who are now really taking a bold step in terms of reimagining work, reimagining their operations. One of the areas I see is insurance, healthcare, payers. They are looking at core areas like claims, revenue cycle management in the payer side, certain provider management, prior authorization. They're really careful about understanding how the processes work and then building agents to emulate human behaviors and multiplying the productivity by 20x or 30x using the agentic operating models. So anywhere where you see a large footprint of human operations are where we are seeing very good adoption of process agents. But across the board, we see co-pilots being implemented to some degree of success. but not making a dent at the bottom line or customer experience level still.
Hey, Vinay, if I can follow on to that, do you see, so financial services and insurance, both highly regulated industries, is
Yes.
that sort of regulatory mindset, that process mindset, make them more open to looking at agentic AI process automation?
Correct. They're very focused on repetitive work, traceable, auditable work, but at the same time, they are also being very careful on having humans in the loop. So that's one of the foundational pillars for Scan is how do we keep human in the loop? While we amplify the human capacity by 20x, we still want to make sure that humans have an accountability to the outcomes. That way, when regulators are questioning, customers are questioning, we should have a clear line of sight into where the buck stops from a accountability standpoint. But it's the right balance between compliance, regulatory aspects, and the human accountability while we amplify the human agency productivity.
Yeah, Cissy, I was going to ask you, based on your insurance experience,
Mhm.
any particular use cases you like in the insurance space?
Well, I mean, I think claims is certainly one of them. It's very experience focused. It's very you have to be very aware of the compliance components of process. But I think there are lots of opportunities, and I think if you think about really the front end or the purchase life cycle of insurance, I don't think a whole lot has been done there, but there's tremendous opportunity there, I think, to qualify and educate customers, match them up with products. I think there's a tremendous opportunity in underwriting, which uses a whole lot of data that's often unstructured and needs to and has real potential for not only productivity gains but significant experience improvements for both the end customer as well as any distributor in the middle, because that's just to this day a very painful experience for most that try to navigate it.
If I may just add a thought to Sissy on the banking financial services side, I see a big opportunity emerging in terms of asset servicing, where we are looking at large scale maintenance of assets as beneficiary maintenance, asset transfers, and so many of these functions which are prone for agentic automation. And likewise, it is also treasury services, fulfillment operations,
Mm-hmm.
complaints, disputes resolution, perfect scenarios for the agentic adoption, because these are very complex even for humans. But if we can train the agents, if they can, humans can become more of augmentation rather than being in the line of delivery. I think banking financial services has a big value chain, including due diligence, KYC refresh. I can go on, but these are the areas which are highly prone for complex decisioning, but also a big lift in productivity.
Yeah, and you make a great point in terms of the complexity, and even in insurance and policy administration, you often have 20, 30, 40-year-old products
Yeah.
that you may have sold, you may have acquired, you may not have great data on them. Again, very, very complex, and you may have one customer calling in on one product from 5 years ago, and the next customer is calling in on a very different product from 30 years ago. It's very, very difficult for humans to navigate that successfully without support.
Very true.
Vinay, if you look at perhaps your client base or even the firms you were with before you were at Scan, is there any particular common denominator, any patterns between those customer engagements where you say these are the couple things that are you attribute their success to, and any common denominator between them?
I think when there is a collaboration between business and technology teams, that's one of the, and I'm not talking any rocket science or path breaking revelation here. Uh, I would say that the biggest differentiator between where I've seen success or where companies being immensely successful versus companies that are struggling is when the business team and the AI teams come together to solve real problems. That is when you start to see real value getting generated and customers seeing production deployments. Whereas 90% of the companies are still within the realm of technology proof points. There is a small team sitting in a small somewhere in corner trying to prove how agentic works, and they still don't have real use cases, real business involvement, and there is a big divide. So I call this divide as a chasm, in terms of the whole evolution of the agentic maturity for an enterprise.
And that goes back to governance, right? I mean, governance and sponsorship has got to be the one that defines what structures work, how teams engage, where the focus is. And that's, it's, again, I think oftentimes senior executives are reluctant to try and maybe even don't feel equipped to direct the teams that way. But if they can and if they will, I think they'll see very different results.
True. And the second thing is, like, I think every large enterprise, when I talk about Fortune 1000 here, they are spawning many agentic approaches in parallel. And that is where I see a dilution of focus, dilution of investments. And there's nobody who is trying to bring all this back into a single consolidated strategy. And I think this is valuable time and investment lost. And some of these companies are so widely disparate in their approaches that even if I can predict right now that even after next 12 months, they won't have anything to show at an enterprise scale of value. So these are the companies I'm more scared about, because they are so, I mean, it's a bunch of intelligent people trying to do very different things in their own worlds. So I think those are the behaviors we have to see how enterprises can bring a little more synergy, collaboration effort, not only between business and technology, but within technology itself. There is so much of disparate threads going on in parallel. We have to start to see how to bring them together.
Yeah, and alignment on expectations, right? Cissy, you and I were talking before about this. There's a question here. What advice would you give to a CIO who's being pressured to show AI results quickly? And like, I'm looking at this saying, I disagree with the framing of the question, although I can't disagree with his feelings. But right, what do you say to that?
Well, I feel for him or her. I mean, it's hard, right? And so, does the CIO have credibility? So you've got to be able to set expectations. You've got to be able to articulate to the organization, to your senior leadership, to your board, what the learning curve looks like, what the failure points have been. You've got to be able to show some forward momentum. You've got to be able to know what you're shooting for. So back to the strategic, what are you trying to do? Yeah. I get it. If you have a task agent over here, you've got some automation over there. Maybe they're working at odds with each other even. So, really being able to step back and articulate what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it, what the challenges are, and be really, really consistent with a communication strategy is really the only way, and this is my sort of executive coaching, that a CIO is going to be successful and be credible with their organization in this journey.
Vinay,
how do you guys set expectations?
Yeah, again, for us, it's very simple, right? It's going back to the basics. If a CIO or a chief transformation officer or a chief operating officer, whoever is driving agentic, if they are not able to reimagine the operating model with agents at the heart of human agency, I think they are not really gaining success. Just deploying 20,000 co-pilot agents is not agentic. I think many companies are trying to do that, and they are facing the problems because after 6 months, they see that there is no value being delivered. So our input has been, how do you reimagine your operations? By understanding how work happens today, where agents play a value, and how you define a human agent operating model. So if you can look at this as an agentic operating model, like understanding the current state of how humans operate, understanding the gaps and lift you get from agentic automation, and then think about the target state blueprint of how humans and agents should collaborate and operate. That is where the strategy comes into play. Then you can bring any tools. There are vendors who are offering discrete task agents. There are vendors coming with their own platform agents. And then you can also build your own agentic teams. But all these have to be synergic with your reimagined target state operating models. And that is where I think CIOs and the C-suite have to invest their time.
And implied, Vinay, you at the end, you said CIO and the C-suite. CIOs can't do it by themselves, right?
No.
So, who are their partners? Who are their stakeholders? How do they engage them? How do they share that accountability for defining where we're trying to go and how we're going to get there, and share accountability in the results? So
it's not a one leader job today. It
No.
is a redefining of the organizations completely. And that's where I would say that this is a large scale, we are at an inflection point. And when it comes at a board level discussion, it can't be the onus of one executive. It has to be reimagining how your companies are going to operate in the world of AI and agentic. I think it's a much bigger problem. I'm scared to be in any of the shoes here, but at the same time, as a vendor who is trying to be earnest and humble about trying to solve this problem in our capacity, we always see a broad spectrum. Now, having seen a spectrum of these opportunities, we can probably make some conclusions better than where individual companies are sitting and trying to solve the problems.
So I kind of hate this question, but it always comes up. It comes up almost every day, at least in my conversations, the jobs question. Well, how do you feel about the AI replacing jobs? Or maybe a better question, Cissy, is, how do you communicate to the organization, how things are going to change maybe, right?
Yeah. Well, goes back to what are you trying to accomplish, right? How do you define success? If the outcomes of that are productivity and job reductions, you have to, number one, be transparent and be proactive with your communications, right? You can't sugarcoat that. You need to be articulate and demonstrable in terms of what you expect the outcomes to be. And then you have to provide whatever it is that's going to make that palatable to your workforce, right? So is it reskilling? Is it upskilling? Is it growth in another area? Or is it, ultimately offboarding, helping people go on to their next assignment. So again, I think just clarity, transparency, and then support in the transition. It's not easy.
Vinay, in the moment we have left, any final advice to companies trying to figure out how do they start with building process agents?
I would definitely go with creating a understanding of how their processes work today and having a digital twin, because if you don't know how your processes work today, where humans are adding value or where they are losing productivity, then you are really applying agent on a wrong place or agentic at a wrong place where it doesn't create value. In fact, it becomes disruptive to the work and the value flow. So I would always start with creating a digital twin of understanding how work happens in a data-centric manner, and then trace it through as you bring agents at different points of the process, replacing human work. Trace that there is a value being created. Trace humans and agents are working together seamlessly. Trace there is no impact to the end outcomes, be it regulatory, customer experience, or productivity. Any of the impact should not also be negative. So making sure that it is resilient and sustainable through some governance mechanisms is very critical. So I'd start with this all three areas, focus on value and complementing human agency. Second is bring a set of different tools that are relevant, be it task, process, platform agents. And third is make sure that you are sustainable and resilient in production.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. We really appreciate it. I know we always get great feedback on these sessions, especially when there's real case studies and you get to see this stuff in action. So, Cissy, Vinay, thank you so much. Thanks to the Skan AI team for sponsoring today's session. And if you're looking for additional help, you can schedule a call with one of our subject matter experts and the team at Skan AI. Just go to irpaai.com/Skan AI. That's Skan with a K. We're happy to walk you through some use cases and customize an approach, especially for you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.